seats so that we might begin on time. Just very briefly, I would like to thank everyone for accommodating the rescheduling of Board Curriculum Council. I did have a family emergency. My son was taken to the hospital suddenly last week, and so I just wanted to thank all of you for being so gracious, especially our leaders, our leaders, curriculum leaders, grade level leaders, our board members, and our superintendent for accommodating my life.
So, okay, well, our first item on the agenda is going to be postponed. The request to approve the schedule changes. The board is going to receive a presentation about transportation related to these proposed changes. So that needs to take place before BCC is asked to approve the schedule. So no, we expect this to move to the December agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Yes, we have been requested by the high school principals to move the discussion of the recommendation for changes to the graduation requirements, if we could move that to the next item on the agenda. Because this meeting was rescheduled, the principals have other commitments at 2:30, and we were just a little concerned that we might not allow enough time for discussion were we to wait till the time on the agenda that this item was placed. So we request approval of recommended changes to the Downingtown Area School District graduation requirements in policy 217. So Mrs. Hickey, if you could pull up those recommendations, please. After 4 meetings with various participants, including curriculum leaders and board members, the administrative team, inclusive of high school principals and the educational directors, namely Dr. Reed and Dr. McNeil, recommend the only change to current Downingtown Area School District graduation requirements as the inclusion of 3 keystone exams, Algebra 1, Biology, English Literature, as mandated by changes to Chapter 4 of the PA School Code. And as you can see at the bottom, we also request that as new keystone exams are required by the state, if and when they are required, that we would also include them as part of a graduating requirement for those classes. We recommend this course of action for the same reasons as those identified by the Graduation Project Task Force when they determined it was in the best interest of our students and the Downingtown community to continue the Downingtown Area School District graduation project, despite the fact that it was no longer required by PDE as a requirement to graduate. Namely, we believe that these graduation requirements are aligned with the vision and beliefs of the Downingtown Area School District's comprehensive plan. We believe that what we are requiring of students enhances their college applications. We believe that these experiences give students learning experiences they might not otherwise have experienced in the classroom. And we believe that these requirements ensure a high quality, rigorous, well-rounded experience for all students. Ultimately, we believe that local control is central to maintaining the excellent reputation of the Downingtown Area School District. We believe our community demands more than what is merely required by the state. We know that the majority of our students will choose rigorous pathways to ready them for post-high school, college, and careers. We also appreciate the necessity for some flexibility in pathways. In addition, we recognize the mandate to graduate all students in 4 years. Therefore, if you could scroll up to the top, Mrs. Hickey, we included a disclaimer statement as part of the policy. And you see that following the word note. Upon request, the principal, at his or her discretion, has the authority to waive any curricular graduation requirement that is in excess of state mandates. The appeal process flow is as follows once the principal renders a decision. Appeal to the principal's immediate supervisor, and finally to the superintendent. We would like Curriculum Council to offer feedback and a recommendation after discussion as to the phrases in the disclaimer or the waiver that address a curricular graduation requirement that is less than what the state is requiring. And you might need to also pull up the state program of instruction requirement. Could we see that, Mrs. Hickey?
Is that in the PowerPoint?
It's on the scrolling agenda. No, the document, you have two documents right in a row. One says, begins with policy 217, the next one begins with program of instruction. Page 26, I'm here on the scrolling agenda. Yes, okay. So we really need to see these documents one after the other. The scrolling agenda works better. Do you have the scrolling agenda, Mary Ann?
I don't believe so.
So it's 7A and 7B on the scrolling agenda.
At 7B, which is the policy. And 7A.
Okay, I need you to bounce back and forth between those two documents. Okay. So what you see in front of you now is Pennsylvania School Code for the graduation requirements. And you can see what the graduation requirements are as per the state. And if you scroll down a little bit, okay. And each of you has this as part of the scrolling agenda. You see that the course credit requirement as per the state is 21 credits. Per the Downingtown Area School District credit requirements, 24 credits. So I'm asking Curriculum Council now for a conversation as to the waiver process. According to the statement, the principal has the authority to waive any curricular graduation requirement that is in excess of state mandates. To Curriculum Council, the question is posed, is this a curricular waiver or a curricular and a credit waiver? If we go back to the Downingtown, the state requires 21 credits to graduate. Currently, our district requires 24 credits to graduate. Okay. So if we were to just recommend a curricular waiver, then a principal might say, yes, you can exchange a credit in, let's just take world language for a credit in another core area. Yeah. Mrs. Hudson.
Well, I'll start the conversation. Well, first of all, what did the principal say?
Principals.
We're fine. This verbiage.
With just curricular and not credit, or just curricular?
I guess that's the question on the table.
Well, what are your thoughts?
As principals of the high school program, we're comfortable with making decisions, so we're okay with it.
Well, to get the conversation started, I guess I would see it just as curricular. I think that credits, I mean, you have to have some standards. Issue credits. I mean, you should not waver on the number of credits.
Thank you, Mrs. Ritson.
I agree with that, and to add on to that, I think we offer a pretty robust course options. So it's not like if they take something, or they take something off, they don't have choice to take other things. There's lots of choice. I wouldn't touch the credits.
Thank you, Mrs. Cranny. Curriculum leaders? Mr. Spears?
If I could pose a question to the principals, would there be circumstances you can envision realistically where there might be the occasion to grant a waiver if they didn't have formal credits, for example, an exceptional summer internship, working with a firm, or some other kind of activity?
I think as we've just started this conversation, I think that there are a myriad of potential exceptions that are out there that we would be handling on a case-by-case basis. But at the same time, we would not want to commit at this point to say, well, we would do this exception, but not this one. We really are going to have to take some time. This is a new requirement that the state has put out there, and we're going to have to spend some time calibrating as the three high schools and say, okay, what types of things are we going to say yes to, and what types of things won't we, so that there's some continuity there.
My understanding would be that if you had these credit requirements, then there would have to be recognized earned credits. Your hands would be tied under those circumstances. Okay.
If you are exempting credits, is there a potential for our students to graduate early because of this?
I think we would have to say, right now, what I heard from our two of the board members was that we didn't want to touch number of credits, that we were looking at just the curricular distribution. So in that case, there wouldn't be an opportunity to necessarily graduate early, other than we have students who do it now. We have students who will take 7+ credits a year, and they can graduate.
But they're still doing the credit requirement. So, I mean, as an outsider looking at it, I would almost want it to say something that you're still required to do the 24 credits written in there somewhere.
Yeah, here, the credit, I love your thought process, because the graduating early could come about with a more robust cyber blended program. So as we move faster and faster, not next year, but I can project 4 or 5 years down the road, and students amass 24 credits in different ways. So here's where we can, and Paul is correct, we already graduate kids early, not many.
It's a very few.
Right, but that's still on the table. The 24 is what we're talking about. What I'm hearing is keep the 24, that's fine. All right, unless,
I have a question though. I mean, is there the possibility that the student who's having trouble with the Keystone exams and who needs extensive remediation might need the waiver of some credits? I don't know that we want to place a restriction like that, because we don't know. It's unknown territory with these Keystone exams.
well, we've always had 24 credits, right? So has that's been less of a hindrance than the 1.8 GPA.
1.8 GPA was the reason kids
So they
weren't graduating. Very rarely do we have kids, and Carol can certainly speak to this as well, very rarely, it was a 1.8, which was a stumbling block for our kids.
My concern is the remediation, I know, is a time sucker, and it's taking away, other things out of kids' schedules, so the ability for flexibility with the credits might alleviate that. I don't know, I just want to throw it out there. Mrs. Bertoni.
Well, my only concern with lowering the 21 is that we need to keep students engaged. And if you're saying you can determine what those 24 are, then maybe the student that's struggling can take an extra art course or some other elective that keeps them engaged in school. So the 24 may not be a hindrance. That would be the Otherwise, with 21, I don't want to see an exorbitant amount of study halls or, you know, stuff where, then I
But I
really.
think that's where the discretion now.
Sorry, my New York voice and the microphone, don't do all the other. I agree that I think what we have here is a standard, and I don't think we sacrifice the standard. That's what we're all fighting for. Every time we step out to make these changes is to increase the standard. And I'm afraid that you'll get caught in this spot where the kids who are going to take 37 credits or whatever are going to take them anyway. I think you're going to get caught in those kids who take the 21 and can kind of wiggle their way out at 21. And those are the kids that might need those extra 3 core, and I'm not even a core curriculum leader, but those extra 3 core courses to really push them into a route, a proper fit for college or something beyond high school. And we might cheat them of that by lowering that standard. It's just,
Thank you.
It might be helpful to know that there are 8 periods in the cycle each day. So it really, if a student took 6 credits each year, they would have achieved their 24. Most students take more than 6, and they don't take a full study hall. So there's plenty of room really for remediation. Need that to happen. You can have a full period, you can still have a full period of lunch, and still earn the 24 credits very easily within 4 years. So it really was the 1.8 that was the stumbling block for some of our students. They would pass the credit, but not meet the minimum GPA. So without that, I don't see any difficulty with achieving the 24 credits and still, having time for remediation.
So we're hearing keep the 24 credits on and maintain the requirement and allow of only the curriculum, but I think we can stipulate that out there. Credits. Not. Fine with that. You guys okay?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify one thing to Mrs. Simonelli's concern about remediation. If, Marion, you just move the scroll up a little higher, if you notice under science, we're requiring biology in grade 9 or grade 10 at the STEM Academy. We are working on changing the middle level curriculum so that students in 8th grade have some of the standards. They'll see more of the standards in 8th grade that they'll also see in 9th grade biology. So it's just not that single year, but they will have more or less a looping type of exposure to biology standards. Mr. Daney has been working with both the high school biology and the middle school teachers to make that happen, which we will rewrite curriculum in the spring and summer of this year. The other thing is Algebra 1. So this year, we're trying to be proactive rather than reactive and giving the students that need additional support that support as they're working through a course. So Algebra 1 in 9th grade, which is the latest year you would be able to take Algebra 1, is currently being offered 9 times rather than 6 times a cycle, so that teachers have extra time for supplemental instruction, extra time to redo or retest if need be, so that the children are ready for the assessment when they take it in the spring.
I have a few questions. How is this going to be communicated, and does this go into effect next school year?
The
Waiver,
yes, so this will need to be in the program of study.
Which is why we're doing it now, because that program of study is being made up.
I think,
It's really in effect for the current 9th grade, because the graduation requirement of Keystone is for that class.
Correct.
As this policy takes effect, so the waivers can start for any of the students for next year, correct? You're not limiting it to 9th graders, are you? I mean, nothing's changed in our credit, so why would we?
No, nothing has changed. I would have no problems whatsoever. You said starting next year,
Right.
not this graduating class. So obviously, everybody's got their courses.
Yeah, this year is done,
Right.
but.
So, but for next year, yes, absolutely, absolutely, yes.
I just think that needs to be communicated pretty well. I don't want
Right.
some parents getting upset because they're paying for summer courses when they find out they're putting.
They don't have to.
So I think this needs to be
Well, we rely on Carol and Paul and Kurt to make sure we communicate it. Rob's around here somewhere. So you're right, it's got to be multiple ways. At the course of study meetings, to say there's been a change. And remember, this is still set up as a requirement, so you've got to request. Otherwise, counselors, Carol, are giving everybody 4 social studies and giving everybody the phys eds. That's what you're taking. That's what's on. So it is a district requirement that has a waiver to it. That's all. So it's not for every kid, but it is for the handful of kids that want to really accelerate, as Carol pointed out, where the parents that I've dealt with in the 5 years I've been here who had children that really wanted to accelerate and were inhibited because of some extra requirements, whatever those requirements
And
may
they
be.
sign up for things in the summer.
In the summer, and they're paying money for things that if it's beyond, if it's beyond what the state requires, and you raise your hand and say, Mr. Early, I'd like it, then we'll take it on. So it's not going to be like real easy, but easy enough.
Okay. I have a few more questions. These are sequencing questions, really, I think. The social studies requirement. Now that we're offering so many fantastic KP social studies courses, is there any way we're going to be changing the sequence so that, I guess my question is there any way we're going to be changing the sequence in social studies? And I guess that would trickle down to middle school too, but is that on the docket to be looked at soon?
So I'll let Ms. Jackson address that first, and then certainly I'll weigh in.
My understanding is that there's going to be conversations regarding looking at scope and sequence, and exactly how that will be worked out. Those conversations have not yet been held formally. To the best of my knowledge, we were working around with the keystones and looking at, because our keystone doesn't come in until 2020, and so far in advance, we have some time for discussion. So although it has been mentioned, to the best of my knowledge, nothing has been finalized or even really put into play to come up before the board. So we are in earliest of preliminary discussions.
The Keystone exams, and as you can see, the schedule Mary Ann has there, we're twixt and tween with what we need to be doing. Anything beyond the class of 2017 and 18 has the caveat pending funding being available.
Which is a big caveat.
It is. And so while we've had discussions about civics and government, do we need to get ready for a civics and government course? And which grade level does it make sense to have a civics and government course? And then we also have to consider the state requirement that we teach U.S. history at every level. So where does that course fit? So we've had those discussions, but as Sharon mentioned, we haven't really come to any firm conclusion because we want to see what the state is going to make available. Not that we don't think it's advisable for students to have a civics and government, but right now we combine that with U.S. history in 11th grade, just because we thought that was a better grade for students getting ready to go into the real world and vote and things like that. But we can't wait till 11th grade if it's a Keystone exam.
It's actually 12th grade.
12th grade, oh, I'm sorry.
And that's, we're worried about putting bio in at 9th grade.
Yes.
But our government course is currently 12th grade. So
Yes.
it's certainly not going to fly.
Yes. So, as Sharon said, right now, we're just holding off a little bit because we have, other changes happening just to see what's going to happen. Especially next year, we have a governor's election, so let's see what happens with that.
So it's still the expectation that 9th grade is African and Asian studies, and
Yes, none of that has
none
changed.
of that's going to change. Okay. And then I have one more question. The middle school, you mentioned you're going to change the middle school science.
Yes, so may I ask Mr. Daney to speak to that?
Yes, we're, the plan is to adjust our 7th and 8th grade science courses to build more conceptually than within the silos with which they currently reside, having life science in 7th grade and and then having a physical science, which is half a year of chemistry and half a year of physics in 8th grade. Let's move more to a conceptual progression so that the topics build on one another as age appropriate as they move forward to again see those pieces multiple times as they move from 6th, 7th, 8th grade into that 9th grade graduation requirement biology key subjects.
So you're putting chemistry and physics, the physical science into 7th grade?
We will be adjusting the placement of all of the pieces that are currently in 7th and 8th grade to make sure that they do, all of those pieces are still covered, but it won't fall necessarily as neatly and cleanly as a physics course or a chemistry course. It was more of a conceptual progression of science.
So you're actually changing the course if you're moving it
Correct.
down a level? Because right now, that seems to be a hard course for 8th graders. You're not just pushing
No,
that back.
we are not just flipping the two courses. There will be curricular adjustments to make sure that all the eligible content from the 8th grade PSSA is taken into account and covered there, as well as pieces that come from the 9th grade biology Keystone exam.
And when will that take effect?
We will be looking for that for next year. So we've got plenty of work to do this spring.
The middle school does get,
Sorry, those kids are going to be taking the Keystones. I had asked them a question, it directly impacts my daughter, who's in 7th grade. And she's, in the current 7th grade curriculum. But then next year, they've got to jump and, have some kind of transition for those kids. And it's tricky.
Yes.
We're glad you're on top of it. Or did that cover all your questions?
For now.
Okay, I do have a question. I know that the STEM graduation requirements, I think they have an extra credit requirement.
they have 26.
Yes.
Okay, so 2. Where's that in the policy? And,
So all of STEM's requirements were approved through their program of study when it was approved in 10, 11 or 11, 12 when the building opened.
I understand that, but I'm looking at our current policy, and of course, this is the policy changes.
Yes.
Shouldn't the STEM graduation requirements be in our policy?
Good point, Mrs. Hurd-Simmons. They had not been.
My feeling is they should be.
Yes? Am I hearing yes from curriculum?
And then I don't know how the verbiage changes if, I'm assuming they have Algebra 1 and biology and.
Well, there are no opting out of courses at the STEM Academy.
Right, okay, so my feeling is we should have a policy then.
Okay.
If it doesn't get voted on in November, maybe December, we can talk about it next month, but we should at least get this passed at our board meeting.
All right, so suppose I take the STEM graduation requirements, which are not really set as a set of graduation requirements in the program of study. They're basically in the program of study per discipline. So it says, world language 4 years,
Okay.
4 credits.
Yes, however you
So I'll
want to
take that and put it in a single document and bring it to Curriculum Council in December.
say. And so, on that note, when you graduate from STEM, you either graduate with a IB certificate or diploma. And the certificate is the DASD graduation requirements, right?
Yes.
So the way we have outlined this as labeling wellness and fitness and physical education and Algebra 1, are their classes labeled the same way? And if not, we probably need to identify that in the policy too.
You mean the correlation
Yes.
between STEM and DASD, and DASD East and West.
Yes. We probably should say, this policy probably should say DASD East and West. And then the other one's DASD
STEM
STEM.
Academy. Maybe we'll get some direction on what that should look like exactly from Dr. Reed and PSBA. Bertoni?
I just wanted to clarify something. I had a board member call me over the weekend because I got a number of questions about the discussion about the graduation requirement. And since we're talking about it, that we're eliminating a history, a social studies or a history, we're dumbing down the curriculum. And I just, so everybody here in the room knows, that wasn't the discussion. The discussion was more a matter of if you have a student that that is looking to go into, say, the medical field, perhaps that senior year they might like to take a science or a math instead. So it was still 4 years in a major subject. So I just don't want anyone to think that we're in any way as a group trying to dummy down our curriculum. And I appreciate the waiver, and I've said before, my kids, 3 children through the district, great education, no complaints whatsoever. But my daughter, who went into nursing, it would have been better for her senior year if she could have taken an AP statistics course or another biology or a chemistry course, because when she got to school, those were the subjects she struggled in and didn't have. So I think this waiver allows us to look at each individual student and find what is their best fit. And I hope that, as Mrs. Cranny suggested, we need to get the information out there, because we're not suggesting that students willy-nilly drop this course or that course, but we really do want them prepared for college. So, lest anyone thought that we were trying in any way to dummy down our curriculum, that is the furthest thing from the discussion that we had. So I just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you, Mrs. Bertoni.
Well, for the record, we're not changing
Well, now
the
we're
social
not,
studies
but-
requirement, so it's not.
But the waiver allows students to have that option.
Oh, absolutely. Well, but I think really what is more correct is we're formalizing what had been taking place anyway. What we heard from Mr. Hurley was that in cases where kids needed adjustments, there were adjustments being made. I think what was more of the issue was that it wasn't widely known that that was an option. And this putting it into a formal policy and our formal graduation requirements, then now makes it known, and it'll be in the program of study where it wasn't before. I know. Again, I don't have a child at either of the comprehensive schools, but I just think that it's, from what all the conversations that we heard leading up to this, some of these things were happening, and it just wasn't, something known that people could do. And as I told Dr. McNeil, parents in this district are looking for their children to largely excel and not look to skirt any requirements. So you wouldn't even necessarily think to ask that you could change or you could do something different. You think you have to do either more than is required, or at least the minimum requirements. So I think this is a good compromise, personally.
Thank you, Mrs. Seminole. Next item on the agenda.
Okay, so we're going back to the regularly scheduled agenda.
Yes.
Request approval of project-based learning workshop and materials for grade 6 center teachers. And it's, Mr. Colby is with us.
Good afternoon. This is a workshop for 30 teachers for 3 days in actually mid-January, where teachers will bring webs of interdisciplinary technology projects, maybe one that concerns science, social studies, language arts, art, and come out with a fully scheduled and fully developed project that has rubrics, etc. So this is something that these projects that are going to be developed are going to be 2 projects that will be signature units of the new 6th grade center. Something that every child will be asked to do and will be a unifying experience among all 6th grade teachers. The Buck Institute for Education is the forerunner in interdisciplinary project-based learning. And project-based learning isn't creating projects, it's a whole other way of looking at learning. And so they are the experts, and they'll be coming in to work with us during those 3 days.
What will the cost of subs be that day, those 2 days?
It will be reduced because one of those days is an in-service day, another day will be a half-day sub, and then it will be a full-day sub. So we're looking at 30 times 140 It's really 28, right now I have 28 teachers. I think Dr. McNeil had a couple teachers that she's thinking of sending as well. But right now I have 28 teachers times 140 for the one day, and then 28 times. Does anyone know what the cost of a half-day sub? Yeah, it's roughly going to be in the area of $5,000 or $6,000.
Could we add that information just as an FYI to the proposal?
Sure.
What happens if there are no snow days used until after winter break? So what does our snow day number 1 become? January 17th?
It's May 24th.
Okay.
I have a question. We haven't actually formally hired teachers for the 6th grade center, have we?
The yes and no. The core area teachers, if 6th grade was in front of your job title, they're involuntarily being transferred, so the core teachers are coming. The encore teachers, we've done approximately 2/3 of the interview, and HR was going to call and make offers today on the interviews that we had already done. So, yeah, they'll be hired
So
by
basically
the time.
talking for this workshop, all the current core.
They're mostly core, and there are a few other encore areas right now. It looks like we're going to have art and integrated digital information technology.
Any other questions or comments? Are we okay to move this forward? Barbara?
And I'll include the cost of the subs in that.
Okay. I'll get that for you.
Mrs. Simonelli, could we go to Mr. Mulvey's other item while he's standing at the microphone?
Absolutely. We identify which that is.
Okay. Request approval of a service agreement for professional development for the 6th grade center in the amount of $2,000.
One of the concerns of the board, and frankly everybody that's involved with the 6th grade center project, is creating an atmosphere of warmth and welcoming. It's 1 year in, 1 year out. Everyone's concerned about the short time that students are in the building and the amount of connections that they'll make. Also, we're bringing 2 schools together, 2 different faculty, Lionville Middle School, Downingtown Middle School, and then a whole bunch of teachers from different groups. Tom Stecker is a noted staff developer in the area, does a lot of staff development around programming the whole child, creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere, team building, leadership building, etc. And Tom is going to be coming in on the work collaboration day and working with a whole bunch of our teachers on remixing teams, low ropes kinds of activities to build teams, and also confidence among the kids and creating a warm and welcoming atmosphere.
Any questions or comments? We can move this forward? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mulvey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the scheduled order. Request approval of EDNA grade configuration changes to accurately reflect current kindergarten programming, and we'll let Dr. McNeil clarify that.
Okay, so EDNA, which stands for, in our business we love acronyms, Education, Names, and Addresses. So what we use this system for is to find the names, addresses, administrator, and related information about educational entities. And PDE uses this database pretty exclusively, and now they are using it as a check on what other database systems school districts use, namely PIMS, the Pennsylvania Information Management System, where all information will be loaded for demographics as well as for other information related to testing. So the entities that use this are school districts, intermediate units, charter schools, non-public, private schools, etc. What happened was that we had errors in our EDNA information. And any changes that are made in EDNA require board minutes and a letter from the chief administrator of the LEA. the local education agency, namely the superintendent. So what happened was that in this system, they had all of our elementary buildings, for some reason, denoted as having full-day kindergarten. So we had to go in and change that so that only the buildings that have full-day kindergarten are indicated as having full-day kindergarten. And to do that, we had to bring this request to Curriculum Council and then subsequently to the full board for approval so that it's noted in the minutes. We can then share those minutes with the EDNA administration and they will verify the authenticity of the changes.
Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, with the municipal? None. Okay. The next item is we are requesting approval of a service agreement for 6 hours professional development for grade 4 and 5 teachers at Pickering Valley.
So Curriculum Council, I apologize that this professional development request is coming to you after the fact. Mrs. Schultz was Mrs. Schultz was a prior teacher, former teacher in the Downingtown Area School District, the IST curriculum leader. She is an outstanding professional developer, and she gave the teachers at Pickering Valley professional development on administering the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system. Last year, this was supposed to happen in every elementary building. Pickering Valley missed that opportunity. They had a building that was very much larger than the other buildings, although that enrollment has come closer this year. We had offered Pickering Valley that support because of their enrollment. So that did not happen until this year, although the support was promised last year.
So you're saying that the other schools have already had this?
The other schools have trained. They have had their internal people train the teachers. The IST who were trained the teachers in the other buildings, yes.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's move this one forward. Training. Okay, we'll do the next one. We are requesting approval to offer AP Music Theory at East and West High Schools in the 2014-15 school year.
Mrs. Thorpe?
Do you want to pull up that PowerPoint? We've been talking about this for a while in the music department, and we've been increasing, obviously, the number of AP courses that are being offered in the district. And this is a part of our rationale. The next slide, it starts on the next slide. Obviously, students that want to major or minor in music could get credit for taking the music theory AP exam, just like in any other subject. Students that take the AP Music Theory exam are less likely to take remediation in college. So as a music major or minor, you take a theory entrance exam to get into a music program in college. And if you don't have the appropriate foundational skills, then you would have to take a remediation course your first semester of college prior to taking Music Theory 1. Also, music as a profession is changing, just like every other profession, and the fields of music industry, management, recording, technology have expanded. A small majority of students that go into music now go into music performance, and not even that many students go into music education anymore. These are the much more popular music fields. Students have a better chance of passing their college auditions, so when you apply to enter into music school in college, your actual audition on your instrument or your voice is combined with that of your theory and music history exams, and then they determine your entrance into that program or not. So most universities, you apply to be into the university and then into the music school. And this theory exam would be part of that entrance into the music school. On the next slide, non-music majors can also get music scholarships if they can perform at a 3 or better on this exam. And there are already students taking AP Music Theory. We're just not giving them credit for it, and it's not helping our school district right now. The students are taking it, and we're giving that in that instruction on our own time, but it's not in our course of study. It's been offered right now to a very limited number of students, and it's not being shown to the public that we're offering this, and it's not counting on our AP honor roll. This current theory one elective is on the left on the next slide. And then AP Music Theory would replace what we currently have as Theory 2. So you can see what we do in Theory 1, and then what we would do in Theory 2 is obviously much more in depth. And we already have a teacher who's volunteered and participating in Mr. Otto, the blended learning opportunity for this course. On the next slide, we polled 191 total music students at East and West in grades 9 through 11, because those would be the students that may be eligible to take the class next year. 119 of them said they would possibly be interested, and 72 said no. There was a higher percentage of students at East than West that were interested in taking the class. The next slide just says that the prerequisite would either be Music Theory 1, or the students would have to take a placement exam to get into the course. And then the next slide, unfortunately, there's a cost that goes with the course. A technology cost, we would need to train 3 teachers. We've already volunteered to be trained. And the technology cost includes 6 full stations. So the stations include a keyboard that's connected to an iMac. Students can enter music directly from the keyboard, or they can enter them on the software that's been proposed as part of this package. And there's also a teacher station. So there's 5 student stations at East and West and 1 teacher station at East and West. And the teacher station allows the teacher to listen in to the individual student stations as the students are practicing and performing, so they can put on their headphones and, say, "Hi, Carrie, I'm listening to you now. Can you play this for me?" Or "Can you show me this, that you've done this?" This is very similar to what is used in colleges around the country, and I think we honestly owe it to the kids to give them this opportunity. The other thing that's not in this PowerPoint that I perhaps should have put in, but this is what is offered at most school districts in the surrounding area, and they have labs like this. They have this at Unionville and TE and Westchester and Coatesville, all the districts that we're trying to compete with. I just think it's really important for the kids. I think one thing that keeps them from taking the music theory courses we have now is that it's not an AP class. It only gives them a third of a credit. It doesn't help their GPA very much, and it doesn't look exceptionally well on their transcript. So there are plenty of students that want to take the class, but there are also students that want to look good when they apply to colleges, and I think what we're doing now is actually a disservice to them. So there you go.
Thank you, Mrs. Thorpe. Mrs. Ritson?
Yes, I would encourage you to go to the Downingtown, I'm assuming the Downingtown Education Fund is the Downingtown Community, is it the foundation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We applied last year for the $5,623 on the east side, and we were awarded that. We're just waiting to use it.
I would encourage you to apply it for the west side as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fitzsimmons, for that encouragement.
Mrs. Barber sits on the board.
I'm sure we'll be doing that, won't we, Carrie?
Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to note that Mr. Case is working closely with us in the selection of the software, having been a former band director. He is very well versed in music and music theory, and I know he was even excited about it, Carrie, I shared it with him, but he's working closely with us to select the appropriate software. Before we leave this motion, I did want to share, if you could pull up that other AP course list, Mary Ann, please. I thought in all the conversation about which AP courses we were offering, which ones we had, were we doing this in a strategic manner? I don't know if those colors are a little off to you. I'm having a problem seeing them here myself, but in the green is what you see as we currently offer those AP courses. And then for 14-15, we have approved the ones in the blue color for the 14-15 program of study. And then you see in the yellow, where the gold is appearing to you, that we are proposing music theory for the also inclusion in the 14-15 program of study. But what I did want you to note is that we are really doing a great job with our AP offerings. You can see that there are very few, Marianne, if you could just point those out, very few that are not in colors. And maybe, because of Rosetta Stone, we will have the opportunity at some point to offer AP courses in those various languages that are part of the Rosetta Stone program.
Dr. Neal?
Yes?
Can you post this somewhere on the website, maybe under curriculum?
Okay.
Or just somewhere, I mean, I think this is a great document. I had no idea that we offered so much and that there are very few areas left to tackle.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Mrs.
And I
Hertzman.
think that would be an important piece for the public to see as well.
I will do that. Thank you.
One little thing to add, thank you, Dave, for being my technology person here. One thing to add, actually, I'm very excited to think that we'd be considering this for our town of music students. We have an amazing music program, as you know, and it actually does hurt. I know that Carrie mentioned this. Some of our students do not take electives, and I know this is not the right reason for them to make this decision, but they sometimes do not take an elective because to get an A in a non-weighted course actually hurts them. So they'll select a weighted class. So to add something in our music field for our town of music students, it does actually advantage them collegiately. So just to Carrie's point, I know you said it's not good for them, but it actually hurts them. So.
If I could just piggyback on that, we have a lot of our graduates that go on in either major or minor in music. I was amazed, but there's quite a number that do, and this will be a big benefit. So, great idea.
Any other questions or comments?
Just, so Julie, your thoughts on art history? I mean, it's, well, don't think that I'm at all for these AP courses, because I know I'm not. But,
In my defense, there are 3 AP art courses on there.
it's what? There's what?
There's 3 AP art courses.
Oh, there are, okay,
Yes.
just not the art history.
It's not, but we
It's,
have talked about it,
it's-
we just haven't recorded.
Well, I remember 100 years ago in college, part of the humanities, a lot of folks took art history. You would think that maybe it might be a good prep.
I'm sending an email right now.
You're talking about it, okay. Well, good. Good.
So I think we're good with moving this forward. Thank you. Request approval to amend the district profile as part of the comprehensive plan and policy 101.
So, Marianne, if you could pull up those recommendations. If council remembers, last month, I had talked with you about community feedback to the comprehensive plan. And we had seen 2 of the suggestions for changing the policy 101. And it was posed to me to offer a recommendation as to which of these or both of these I might recommend to council for their consideration for change. So what you see in front of you is that. I am recommending that council consider the community feedback in suggestion 1 as to move forward to amend our district profile and our comprehensive plan, policy 101. So we would change the vision statement 4 to read, act in a respectable manner as a responsible, contributing citizen of the local, national, and global society. So we are adding the word national to local and global. So this would change the vision statement. If you could just scroll down a little bit, Marianne, so that we could see right there. See the statement with the word national included.
Any questions or comments?
The other suggestion on the next page, my recommendation is to not change the mission statement. If we could scroll, okay, there you go. The rationale, I'm thinking that we need to keep our mission statements simple. Also, the implication or the inference in this feedback was that an emphasis on 21st century skills precluded an emphasis or a teaching of basic skills. But in fact, critical thinking and 21st century skills include an understanding and a mastery of basic skills. So my recommendation is to leave our mission statement as it is.
We good with this?
Yes? Great.
Awesome.
So I'll get with Dr. Lee to change that policy 101.
And last on our list, field trip.
Oh, no,
We've got more.
the comprehensive plan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're not finished with that yet.
I skipped one. I read them together. Request approval of district comprehensive plan with the amended change you noted before.
Yes, yes, so that includes the amended change, right. I would like to just quickly take you through the PowerPoint so that I'm sure that you're clear about what you're approving, because up to probably maybe 3 weeks or a month ago, I had told you that we didn't need to have board approval of the comprehensive plan, when in fact, Phase 2 districts, of which we are one, do need to have the comprehensive plan approved by the board. So it will go away for Phase 3 and subsequently not need to be approved, but for us this year it does need to be approved. So as I just move forward, just want you to make sure, we could just keep scrolling through, Marianne. We understand that comprehensive planning is an ongoing process. Even though we won't have to do it and have it approved by the state, we are always re-examining what we do to make sure that what we do is the best for students and that we have a top-performing, excellent district. Next slide. This is right from the state, characteristics of high-performing districts. Of course, I think if you didn't have that heading, you would say characteristics of the Downingtown Area School District, because this describes us. What is required in a comprehensive plan? We have gone through, next slide, all of these steps. We had a group comprised of community, business, teachers, administrators, that put together a profile. Our district level teacher leaders met with their teachers to talk about core foundations, which is all about academics, instruction, assessment. We did a needs assessment. We worked with our schools to profile what were the challenges in our schools that drove our district level challenges and accomplishments. We have action plans that we are in the process of implementing as we speak, not waiting until 2013. So once we get approval from the board, we will have the affirmations in the form of our superintendent and our board president sign off on our comprehensive plan. So next slides describe to you the district profile, which is staying in place. You know, it would be nice if each of us, although I can remember years ago when someone made us all memorize this, so we certainly don't want to be forced to memorize anything, but it does succinctly describe what we do in our district. The next slides describe our vision statements. Again, our collective group of community folks put this together. Next slide, our shared beliefs. Next slide, our description of our educational community. all of these mission statement, vision, shared beliefs, description combined into the district profile. Our goals for the district, simple, 2 of them. As I said, 1 is in place already with the professional development, professional learning opportunities that we have in place for our professional staff. And goal number 2, we are in the process with a district level team that includes administrators, teachers, psychologists, to find ways to ensure that students who are academically, who are struggling to achieve academically because of other issues are supported, and that we do support our principals and our teachers in this process. And then finally, I just wanted to share with you that timeline, which I know you have seen often, that this timeline we have met, and we are here in November to ask the board for its approval of our comprehensive plan. The document that Marianne did not include in the scrolling agenda, which I believe was something like 130 pages, something like that, is the document that we would ask the board to approve. It has everything, all the information that is in the database, in the PDE database online. And it contains each of those areas, the core foundations, the profile, the needs assessment, etc. Has all that information in it. We didn't include it in the scrolling agenda because of its length.
Questions or comments? Wow, this is an amazing project, and I'm sure you all will feel good to have it signed, stamped, and delivered officially, so thank you.
Hallelujah.
And last but not least on this agenda, field trips.
Thank you, Mrs. Simonelli. Thank you.
Jen, just so you know, I look forward to this the most.
Well,
I just want to be
as
clear.
you would, and I have a feeling some of us may want to join this one and only field trip that I am proposing today, and that is because it's to Hawaii. Yes, Mr. Mounts and Ms. Anderson are both proposing a trip to Hawaii open to students at all 3 of our high schools, chosen through a lottery system that will, it is a non-curricular trip, but it does have sort of a curricular bent in that it helps to prepare students for their science courses. They will have the opportunity to study organisms in their real and natural environment. I mean, if there's no better place to do so, I think this is it. They'll not only go snorkeling and go to special educational programs with a marine biologist, they'll also visit volcanoes, they will visit battleships, and they will have quite a few experiences that really prepare them for some of the work that they'll do in 10th and 11th grade. And so, we are asking for this trip to be banked as a non-curricular trip. Just to note, it will be taking place over the summer, and no one will miss any school time for it. And they do not need chaperones, I asked already.
Questions or comments?
Excuse me, is there a projected cost?
There is. It is about $2,200 per student.
How many days was that, Ms. Saxon?
Look again here. They are back in 8 days, so a full week.
Extending it for professional development for teachers.
Oh, that's a great idea, that we should do professional development in such an environment. I like this. I like this very much. We'll put that one under consideration.
We good with moving this forward? Thank you. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of our curriculum and resource approvals and to welcome public input. Any comments or questions from the public?
actually do have a question. I know that we have been talking about extending the school day for 15 minutes, and according to here, it says on the agenda that is now 25 minutes, is that correct?
I think there's a typo on.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, and then it's 15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a typo on, I noticed that too.
Okay.
That first item?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments or questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. We will move on to our program information, and Mrs. Stern. Math in focus.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I am back to talk about math. First of all, I'm glad to say that tonight we start our parent universities, and we'll be at West Bradford tonight doing Bradford Heights and West Bradford. So it took a while to get this up and running and figure out who was doing what, getting the invitations out, making sure the parents are aware, but tonight we start. All right. So the purpose of Parent University is why is a new mathematics program? It's not just that we decided we needed a new program. There was definitely reasons for why we needed to do this. So we're going to talk a little bit about the new standards and how we need students to start learning and understanding mathematics differently and at a deeper level. The second purpose is why do we choose Math in Focus versus another program? There's other programs out there, but it wasn't just what we were looking for, especially in the area of professional development. So as we said, when we went to purchase this program, a lot of the programs, professional development was nothing more than logistics of how to get through the textbook, how to use ExamView. It didn't have anything to do with what actually is going on in instruction, and we needed professional development in content as well as pedagogy and how exactly do you implement this. The next part of the Parent University will discuss the methodology of Math in Focus. How is the instruction different? So we take a look at the interlocking of the concepts and skills so that students understand the why and the how. How also will students learn from visual models and the use of those models so that they do learn conceptually, they do learn pictorially, and last but not least, abstractly. Also want to talk a little bit about problem solving and how Math in Focus, its whole program is based on problem solving and getting students used to that environment. And also, we're going to teach students less content and have them learn more because again, this is a mastery curriculum. We are no longer in a spiral program. And it also provides for differentiated instruction. The next part will be how is it different? Again, a lot of this deals with the depth and the breadth of the program. To explain some more about the spiral and the mastery, the mathematics anymore is not so much about answer and getting, but it's about really thinking about mathematics and how that has to be taught and learned differently than what our students are used to. Not that getting right answers aren't important anymore, but the process of getting to that point is very important. And that Math in Focus is different because it deals with the concepts, and then it deals with the pictorial representation, and then the students learn the abstract or the different ways of getting answers more efficiently. It also encourages students to go deeper. It challenges them. So we're going to look at it differently. We're going to look at it more deeply. For instance, two things we want to definitely talk about are number bonds and bar modeling. So with number bonds, our younger students learning about part, whole, and how do you compose and decompose numbers? How does that build into fact fluency and fact family? How do number bonds create the relationship between addition and subtraction? And also it takes students into the community of property. As students get older in second grade, they'll start transitioning from number bonds, which they will continue up to third grade, but they'll start moving over to bar modeling, which is a pictorial representation of the problem. Students will use that strategy to illustrate problems. They'll learn to visualize the situation and visualize the mathematics and what's happening. And this will take them right into Algebra 1, because they'll eventually learn that those little rectangles, when they're bar modeling, will be the variables. Also, the approach to differentiated instruction is different, and we need to also talk about the difference in homework, so that parents know not to expect homework on a daily basis. And when they do have homework, they should have fewer problems that involve more critical thinking. And it won't involve those standard algorithms we're used to before. Here's 10 problems, they're all the same thing, do them over and over again. They'll be different. So we're going to also have them, if we have time, to try a few problems so we can take a look at number bonds. So we have our whole, and then we have our partner students, they know one of the parts is 7. They eventually have to be able to figure out, here again, that builds that algebraic thinking. Or our bar modeling, if we have a smaller number, the larger number is 3 times 3, and the sum of the two numbers is 36. Again, you'll notice that 4 of those rectangles has to be 36, so each rectangle is 9, which means your numbers are 9 and 27. We will build students into doing that at a very young age. We also want to very importantly talk about the support that's available for parents. Our understanding is that parents definitely want to help their children, and at this point, they're not really sure how to do that. So we want to emphasize Think Central. All students and parents do have access to that technology. It's a great resource. There's background and parent support videos with at-home suggestions. They can go on and look at those. There are tutorial lessons to help the children. There are mathematical games so that students can practice what they already know. They have an online textbook, so if they need that resource to look back on what they did that day in class, they can look at that. There are virtual manipulatives, which are awesome because the students in class will have physical manipulatives. If they don't have those at home, most of them at least, I would think. My kids, you might be able to find some, but most normal people probably don't. So they would have virtual manipulatives. They look like the ones in class. It's just not the same interaction with them because you have to deal with it on a computer. And there's also other interactivities that children can do. So those are the purposes of why we're having Parent University. There will be 5 of them. Like I said, tonight we'll start at West Bradford for Bradford Heights and West Bradford. Tomorrow night there's another one. Then there's one Thursday night. And we have 2 more next week. So what the schools did is they partnered up, paired up, and then decided which school they wanted to have that at. We also expect to deal with other questions, dealing with testing and pacing and gradebook and how all that works, and more about homework, and how are we supporting students at varying performance levels. And if you keep going, there are the dates and where we'll be on our Traveling Parent University Math and Focus show. And at this point, if some of the grade level leaders said that they would speak about things that are going on in their grade levels with Math and Focus to this point.
Kelly, can I just interrupt for 1 minute? I just wanted to clarify for Curriculum Council. The support for parents was something that we heard over and over again because parents were confused as to, what it could look like at home for them to help their children with homework or with whichever concept they might be struggling. So Kelly plans to do a demonstration lesson on the 2 of the key concepts in Math and Focus, bar modeling and number bonding.
Should we do that right now?
For parents. If we had time, I asked her if she would do those for us at Curriculum Council. I was asked as to why a teacher wouldn't be doing this at the Parent University. And so I just wanted Curriculum Council to know the answer that I have given folks is because at this point in time, we are the 2nd week in November on a brand new program that is very different from any mathematics any of us have ever learned or taught before, that it seemed inappropriate to put that kind of pressure on a teacher, even a teacher who was willing. And we have wonderful people who you will ask them, would you please do this? And they would say, sure. Even though they were nervous and concerned about how it might go because they don't know it well enough yet. So we decided that Kelly was the better person because she has an in-depth knowledge and understanding of the program. She also has the background to answer questions that might come up as to the relevance of this particular activity. So for all those reasons, we thought Kelly was the better person to do the demonstration lessons. But we want to make sure that Parent University focuses on what parents need. So we don't want it to be, what do the teachers tell me, some of my PowerPoints are death by PowerPoint. So we don't want to kill anybody with a PowerPoint. We want to make sure that they tell us in the meeting what it is they need, and we provide that. So hence time for questions. If there are questions about the grading, the assessment, we want to allow sufficient time for that. So yes, thank you, Kelly. Kelly is doing an outstanding job with really helping us to understand this program. She's got a vast knowledge of the program herself. It was asked by Curriculum Council last month, or in September, I believe, if we could hear from the teachers as to how the program was going. And I asked if you could wait till November so that the teachers could have a little bit of time to actually get into the program. So, you know, I don't want you to be suspect of what the teachers will say, because I believe that our teachers will give the good, the bad, and the in-between, because there have been struggles, and we need to know what those struggles are so that we can address those struggles. So I don't know, Kelly, if you have a system as to who is starting, or we would like to hear from each grade level. I think that's very important. There they go. See, they're ready right here.
Just a few of them are just me. Come on,
So who's starting? Kindergarten? Oh my God. Are you winding up? All right, we'll start with third grade and work our way. Which way? Up or down, Mrs. Simonelli? What do you think? Okay, like kindergarten.
For kindergarten, luckily, we're starting out with the students not having any prior background knowledge. So this program for kindergarten has been a godsend compared to what we had had before. I'm seeing a lot of success in the students. They're talking about math. They're enjoying all the manipulatives. The application piece for the kindergarten, at first we were a little skeptical with the workbooks, but doing all the lessons and using the hands-on and then doing the application, you're really seeing the students getting it. We've done the assessments, and again, for our piece, we don't see the problems with the assessments that we're seeing with some of the grades that might have a gap in the learning. So for our piece, it is working beautifully. We're seeing a lot of success with the students, and the parents are really seeming to understand it at the kindergarten level.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Kelly, just before we go any further, for those folks who might not be familiar, folks who know the program know we have been talking about gaps. What are we talking about when we say gaps? What does that mean exactly?
Well, what happened with the new standards is we have gaps. We have content gaps and we have problem-solving gaps, because the rigor at which the Common Core is written is a much higher performance expectation than our students or anybody has been used to in the past. Plus, with content, you have to understand some grade levels only kept 40% of the content they taught prior to this. So 60% of their content were somewhere else. So some of the content moved down, some of the content moved up. So the things we used to see in elementary, such as probability, are now in the middle school. But what we're seeing a huge move in is fractions. I mean, students have to leave 5th grade with having done everything with fractions and learned it except for division, fraction by fraction. I mean, that is huge. That is a huge gap in what we have to fill at not only elementary level, but we're filling at the middle level as well. And also, students have to be able to know their facts earlier than what they did before. I mean, we're already jumping in with, some long division in 4th grade, and we're, moving, so it is huge. Like I said, when a grade level only gets to keep 40% of the content it had last year, that is significant change. Not only was it a change in the content, but what also got compounded was the change in the problem-solving skills and the expectation that students have to be able to apply all of this stuff and apply it in novel situations that they haven't been taught those types of problems, but they need to take the content and apply it in a much different situation. It's It's the same thing with the Keystone Algebra 1. Our students were not taught before the way we're having to instruct them now. So it's a big change in gaps dealing with content and with problem solving and the expectations.
Thank you, Mrs. Byrne. Thank you, Mrs. Leggett.
My back's different.
So for first grade, we'll start with the kids. The kids are really loving the learning. There's a lot of manipulatives, and we're in a geometry chapter right now. The kids are in the previous math program we had, there wasn't so much building, understanding, and now there's lots of hands-on building, so they're loving the manipulatives. They also love the number bonds. When we pulled the teachers at our last grade level meeting to say something positive about math and focus, everybody said they love the number bonds. And we have them really big in first grade. And they get it. A lot of teachers have applied, like I got little paper plates, so we have a big paper plate and little paper plates, and then they move the paper plates around and attach them with straws, and every chance they get, can I make a number bond? So they love making number bonds. And then the tricky part was trying to figure out, where the big number goes. So we talk about it, it's like a little robot with little hands, and then they remember that the big number always goes in the head. So they love the number bonds. The struggles teachers are having is the flow of the lesson. It's a different experience than lesson and practice, and every day is not the same. So the flow of how the lesson goes has been a struggle. The professional development that the company provided when the developers came into our classrooms and taught our kids a lesson, and then we got to debrief afterwards. That was huge. That was helpful for learning how the flow of the lesson goes. We're even in first grade still, we're struggling with differentiation. We even though we didn't level before, we still have huge levels of kids in first grades of high learners and the ones that just aren't getting it yet. That's a struggle for us. Our biggest struggle was which test to give. There are 2 tests to give at the end of the chapter. And you'll hear this from the higher grades as well. One is called the test prep. The test prep gives basic understanding questions. My understanding is maybe about 2 or 3 of the questions are basic understanding. They give application questions applying what you learned in a different way. And then they give questions that are novel situations. We gave that in our first graders who had never taken a formalized test before, who didn't know what multiple choice was, who don't even understand where question 1 is and question 2 is. Just, it was horrendous to give them that test with only 2 or 3 questions of what we actually taught. I mean, one of the questions had like 7 of these attached together. 1 is good, but 7 for a kid that's never problem solved like that before was not acceptable for a lot of our teachers. So the second option is the chapter review test, which tests the understanding about what was actually taught. And then we've switched to giving that, and that's a much better fit because it's testing in first grade what we taught. However, we're taking those novel questions and those application questions and using them as teaching tools to formally teach our first graders how do you problem solve? How do you take the problems and break them down into parts to be the problem solvers that they'll eventually grow into? So we didn't throw them out the window, we're using them to teach our little guys how to problem solve and how to think. That's for sure.
Thank you, Mrs.
Oh, one more thing. And at conferences, from parents, I heard nothing but positive things from just my parents. They see the problem solving happening, and they were really excited about the program.
Thank you, Nancy. Second grade, Mrs. Filiaggi.
Ditto, and ditto. Let me just add a couple of things. There was a time when, we like to do everything very, very well. and it's new for all of us, and that's the biggest challenge. You know, are we meeting our expectations? Planning went out the window, where it used to be able to plan 5 days of lessons ahead of time. Now we do 2, my team does, and then we reevaluate because it's also new. But I was feeling particularly great for how well my kids were doing over, I teach second grade, 3-digit subtraction regrouping over zeros, which is a really, really tough concept. And they were doing great, and Kelly was getting one email after the other about a lot of things and nothing very happy. So I asked her if she wanted to come in and spend some time with my class. What did you say? That's what they need.
They got it. It was awesome. They made the transition so well. But when I got there, Bobby already had them at the front of the class, so I didn't want to disturb them. So I sat down, and she was telling children a story about somebody who didn't like math. They worked really hard, and finally they got it. This one little girl raised her hand, and Bobby called her, and she said, "I just don't understand that somebody could not like math." And a little boy said, "It's the best part of the day." And Bobby and I looked at each other.
After reading.
Yeah, and she said, "I didn't pay them to say that." They get it, and I've seen that in our classrooms. I mean, they're working through it, and it takes time. And that's another thing Bobby was saying, is the pacing is much slower than we used to. And we're used to hurrying and just go, 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 go. We've had to really slow down and say it's okay to take the time to get them to understand it. But I did see it in Bobby's classroom.
Just so you recorded those statements for those parent meetings that you're going to have.
I'm really anxious to see how many parents do show up at the parents' meetings, because like Nancy said, at my conferences, the conversations were all very positive and upbeat. I mean, maybe that'll change when the ESARs go out. I don't know. Actually, you know, out of 20 conferences that I have, only one parent's actually looking at grades in grade book. Now, I'm only, you know, second grade, not only, but second grade, they're not really used to the concept of having an online parent portal. But the parent universities and the ESARs will tell the tale. But so far, so good. It's going great. It's zapping a lot of time, and, you know, we're rearranging some things to try and devote more time to math and worrying about the kids that aren't getting, you know, that need further differentiation, because that's one of the biggest challenges, is how do you do that in this program? How do you differentiate for the kids who really, really aren't getting it? So, but moving on.
Thank you, Bobby. Mrs. Egan, 3rd grade.
So I've been able to see the program as a parent and as a teacher. And in both of my roles, the one thing that is in common is the increased rigor that I'm seeing as a teacher, and then also from my 1st grader and 5th grader. And yes, the 1st graders love number bonds. My daughter draws them all the time, makes them for her teacher, takes them in every day. They love the number bonds. My 5th grader, who's very good at math, it has been a challenge. There are definitely gaps that, you know, he hasn't had up until now that he's, you know, catching up on, but, you know, there's definitely the increased rigor that we were warned about. The challenges that I'm seeing as a teacher are going to continue with the gaps and differentiating. What I tried to do in 3rd grade is balance for my teachers the ability to fill the gaps, but also keep moving forward, because in 3rd grade now we have the PSSAs in March. So we do have to cover material necessary for those tests. So I created a guideline for the remainder of the year to help teachers stay on track, build it a few days when necessary to hopefully give them time to go back and reteach or fill the gaps that are there. I've also moved chapters around this year to prepare for the PSSA testing, because if we followed just the program chapters 1 to 19, there were many skills that we would not have gotten to in time for the PSSAs. So we are not teaching the program chapter 1 to paper 5 through 19. We have moved around chapters accordingly to move the PSSA material to the forefront. So originally we were going to be doing benchmark testing and mid-year and end-of-year testing, and with Kelly's approval, we will not be doing those this year because we did have to move things around, and we will implement those next year so that we can see how children are growing throughout the program. We've also been using the second grade reteach materials if we get to something that the kids should have known or would have known had they been in the program last year to help fill the gaps. For example, our chapter 2 was mental math and estimation, but then they also had to solve problems that included regrouping in addition and subtraction up to 4-digit numbers, which they hadn't done. So, we had to take the time to teach them how to subtract with regrouping over 4 digits across zeros so that they could do it in order to check their problems with their estimation. Also, we went through every assessment for the assessments that we've already done, but then again for the remainder of the year. And teachers looked thoroughly through the chapters and then at the assessments. And we took out any items that were those novel items or that teachers felt were not instructed during the chapter. We can't use the chapter review like first grade can use because it's in our textbook and it's available online for parents and students to see. So we have to use the test preps. So that's how we're sort of getting around those types of questions. Now, given that, there were many chapters that we did not pull off any questions, that we left the test the same. We will also be teaching those questions to the kids that we do pull off so that they do have exposure to them. So those are a couple of things we're doing to try and get around the knowledge gaps and things like that. The positives are the kids do love it. They love the manipulatives, the visuals, the smart board lessons, the games. The program gives plenty of practice for the kids to get it. And I believe as we continue through the program that the kids will be successful. Once they get the foundation, once those first graders have it and then go to second grade and then get it and then go to third grade, once they've had the program from year to year, and that's when we'll start basing back in those questions that we took out. Once the kids that are now in first grade get to third grade, we'll put those questions on those test preps back in. I'm thrilled that we're doing the parent universities. Hindsight's 2020. I wish we could have done those ahead of time so that maybe some of the anxiety that's been caused by the parents and the kids, we could have, beaten them to it. But I'm thrilled that we're going to be doing that for our parents. So, thank you.
Another huge transition gap, for instance, that we saw in third grade is the new standards expect students to start multiplication with 6s. Our third graders this year didn't have multiplication 0 through 5. So we're having to fill that and give that whole thing time so we get the times table 0 through 5, all that multiplication taken care of before we can go 6 through 9. So that was just one big transition gap that we're seeing, for instance, in third grade that we had to adjust. Third grade took a lot of adjustment. Like Danielle said, we had to move some things around, which wasn't exactly our idea of implementing the fidelity, but in order to get ready for the PSSA, we had to do it.
Because the PSSA is the same this year. It's not the new Common Core PSSA. So that's why, just so everybody is aware, that's why we had to manipulate the program in order to fit the old PSSA that we're still taking this year. In 2014-15 was the new Common Core PSSA. We follow the program the way it's set up. We should be able to cover all the material that's now eligible content.
Audrey, do you have anything?
I do. Thank you, Danielle. Do we skip fourth grade?
Well, technically, yes.
Um,
Because she gave us an option. She
Oh,
said,
I
I just want a few people to talk, so are there any volunteers? And I said, I would volunteer not to talk. So, and now then
I had a great transition to it.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, moving right along to fifth grade. The curriculum gaps seems to be the biggest problem in fifth grade. And it's stated by other people in the grade level. There's a certain level of mastery that needs to be attained in the previous grade. So we have been pre-testing the kids to find out what their background knowledge is.
Do you have a microphone on?
I don't. I thought I did. Okay, a little closer. The numbers of levels in a class are huge, and teachers are struggling with kids who don't know the material versus kids who were never taught the material versus the kids who have the concepts. So how are these issues being resolved? The teachers have looked at the gaps that occurred due to the Common Core shifting, and they have used numerous strategies to help these kids. Teachers are using small group instruction to fill the gaps, such as using the 4th grade material in 5th grade with those students who still need to master that material, and at the same time then differentiating with the kids who were shown proficient with the 4th grade material with problem solving or maybe study island. Then once the class is back together, they move on with the 5th grade curriculum. The teachers in 5th grade spent the early dismissal, October 16th, looking at the actual assessments, and they actually took them. The reason for this was twofold. It's just good practice to understand what's on the assessment, but it also gave them an opportunity to look at these novel items. And these novel items were really hard. And so what we determined that we would do is for this year, they would take the novel items, but they would not count them on the, as part of the assessment of the grade book. But it was still a good idea just to understand where we were going with this rigor. The other thing that came out of that meeting was a real sense of sharing retests and different ideas across the grade level so that we would work harder, work smarter, not harder. The biggest concerns that we have right now are trying to meet so many different needs within the classroom. Even with differentiating, it's still it's hard to leave a group of kids who still don't understand the concept and move on to another group of children. Teachers just don't like to do that. The learning flow, somebody else mentioned. Again, we have a different way to do it. It's teach a concept, give them a guided practice, then keep them with you and go to another concept, and then go to a guided practice. So you can't really release the kids who really understand it, because there may be another concept coming within a couple of minutes that they need to stay with you. So it's just learning how to do this new flow. The timeline is also a concern. When we step away from the curriculum in order to fill the gaps, we still need time to get back onto the curriculum, and so teachers are concerned that we may not get as far this year as we might have that we might in the future. And parents at conferences were concerned about how fair the assessments were. When kids are looking at these assessments and don't understand because they haven't had the background experience of the content or the problem-solving piece, they're really talking about how unfair the assessment might be to their child. And we talked about scaffolding at our conferences and making sure that parents understand that we're really trying to fill in this background knowledge for them, but they realize that, that still might be an issue. As far as what Danielle said about PSSA, one of the things that the 5th grade has talked about is using Study Island to catch kids up on some of the other areas that are still going to be tested on, as well as building plans for many lessons throughout the winter. Overall, I've been talking to my class specifically about the 8 mathematical practices, and every time somebody does a little bit better, they're all giving them high fives about their persistence and staying with it, and so they understand that piece. I'm not sure all the teachers are aware that that's going to be something on gradebook that they're going to be needing to look at, and I wonder if there's something that we can come up with in a checklist. And since it is a little bit late into the year, maybe we could have kids do a self-assessment as to whether or not they think they're using those practices and how well they're using them. I don't know if it's on the primary report, but it is. But that, again, and there's some really neat websites out there that are using kid-friendly language with that. Because if you look at what Common Core has, I'm not even sure if parents would understand what Common Core those are, but the ones with kid-friendly language, we can even send those on to parents to kind of understand what those mathematical practices mean. But overall, I think my kids really like the program, and they're really successful. Thank you.
Another question about the mathematical practices with Kelly. I know we don't want to use SAR as
The plus or a minus, they either meet or needs improvement. There's a couple that we haven't, at least in 3rd grade, we haven't really been able to give exposure to yet, like constructs a viable argument to critique others. Are we able to just leave that blank instead of putting a plus or a minus? I know you can't. Is there an N? Can we put the N for a couple of those? Okay. All right. Thank you.
As you know, there are some things that even younger grade teachers aren't really going to get into and talk
Right.
about.
Right.
It's just too long.
Well, we talked about that with the individual standards, that there are things that you wouldn't get to. But
I knew with
if
the
the end is
standards you could put
available
an N,
with
I
the
know that.
mathematical practices, that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
If I could, briefly, I would like to commend the grade level leaders. They are really the guiding light for the teachers at the grade level. They are the ones who bring many things to our attention and suggest strongly that we might want to think about. When you're in a position in central administration, you're removed from the daily happenings in a building. It's essential that you have people who are forthright, honest, trustworthy, and have the initiative not only to make suggestions, but to also implement those suggestions. So the grade level leaders led a grade level meeting. I think it's important for the board to know this. They led a meeting with their peers where they took a look at the assessments, because this is what we were hearing across the board. Kids were having meltdowns. Parents were so upset. Kids who had been getting good grades were coming home with terrible scores on their papers. They worked with their teachers to say, okay, what are we going to do about this at our grade level? And we need to be flexible enough when we're implementing a new program to say, it is not the end of the world if we use what was supposed to be a summative assessment as a formative assessment. It's not the end of the world if we remove items that the program says are essential to students understanding the program. We have done something amazing this year, implementing a program like this, K through 5, and I understand the struggles of the 4th and 5th grade, 3rd grade as well, the struggles at those grade levels with the content gaps, as well as a teacher saying, I'm instructing this, but this is not what is being assessed on the test. How do I explain that to my children and their parents? So we are, and I say we, it's the royal we, because the teachers are doing this work, not I. But we are working on making this better for children so that they do love math. It's not just the Euclid Hills 2nd grade 2 children that love math, but our children across the board who love math. And it's just important for you to know, I think, the amount of time, energy, and how professional these people are, because it's not an easy balance to be a teacher and a quasi kind of administrator when you're leading your peer group. So it's a very difficult balance. Our teachers are so professional, and they're trying their level best to make this program work, and we so appreciate that. I would like to say, as we think about grades, grades are the one thing that people are holding on to. Well, my kid's not getting an A, or my kid's not getting a B, or a 4, or a 3. Suppose we didn't give grades. And parents need to know how their children are progressing, but do we really need a grade this trimester? I just throw that out there for Curriculum Council to think about. And what does the progress look like for parents? Because our parent portal is all about communication with parents. So we're not waiting till December. Remember when we didn't have our conferences till December, and some parents weren't getting information until December. Well, that's not the way we want it to be. But we also don't want to be forcing a grade system when children are trying to learn a program through no fault of their own or the teachers, there are content gaps. So I think it's something for us to think about. Yes, Mrs. Hertzman.
You only have a couple of weeks, right?
Yes.
To think about it.
Yes, that's true.
So did you
I
think?
think you have.
I know mine.
You even have less time than that, because I wasn't aware until somebody told me today that the ESARs are open, so.
Well, I just think parents think about, okay, this is on the report card, now it's like my child is marred. I mean, people take things seriously in our district, and if they're used to getting 4s and they come home with a 1, or they're used to getting A's and they come home with a D, when that really isn't accurate in terms of what this program has been telling us.
And you're absolutely right about the parents. I worry about what the effect that grade has on the child who gets the 1. And a kid who's in 3rd or 4th grade who gets told first trimester that they can't do math, you're not going to change his or her mind. And I'm all for doing away with the grades. I mean, it's certainly up to the teachers what you think is best, but I think that's a very good idea.
I don't know, we have principals here.
Amen.
Yes, Mrs. Lighten.
If that's, I'm all for that, but I'm wondering about the mathematical practices too, because I think as teachers, I know a lot of my first grade teachers didn't even remember that that's something they're supposed to be assessing, or even know themselves exactly how to look for all those mathematical practices. So if we're not giving grades this trimester, I would also ask that we not assess the mathematical practices at this trimester as well.
I think there's an in-servicing that. I think that would be a great opportunity to have some in-servicing with teachers and conversations about how to identify that, what to be looking for. Maybe create some checklists.
Moving forward.
Moving forward.
I think sometimes the devil is in the details, Mrs. Bertoni.
I don't know, I understand the concern about assessing, and I could see not wanting to maybe, because of the difficulty right now, put that out to parents, but I would be reluctant to say not do some assessing, because it's kind of like it builds.
We would continue to assess. What we're saying is this first trimester has been such a struggle. Many of the teachers decided to use at least 1 or 2 of the assessments as formative, which in our language means it doesn't count for a grade.
The one teacher just, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, but you said about not doing the assessment, that
Yeah, not assessing the practices.
They're not assessing.
So not assessing the practices, that makes me a little nervous, because, and I understand that maybe you can't do.
It's a plus or a minus, and it's more an observation thing than anything that there's a test for.
Right, but I still am a little leery of not assessing, because how are you gonna know where students are?
We are all doing the assessments. It's not a,
Would be on the ESOL.
okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
They can still see it in hack.
That's one, thank you.
All right. So I think I'm hearing curriculum council say you are in support of this notion. I need to get with the principals to see what this looks like, because this would need to be communicated to parents. We have to get it out to the greater audience of teachers. And what does it look like for parents? So we've already had conferences.
With about 98% of elementary parents.
Okay.
And I would just say I'm completely in support of the idea. I would just beware of maybe some potential negative feedback in PR of parents saying, oh, grades are so bad, they don't want to give them. I think you need to be conscious of that in your message. That's how, the wording. Right. I think most people will be very receptive to the idea, understanding the struggle. I just think you want to be conscious of that.
Good idea.
And what, because the grades we put grades in the grade book. So what would teachers or technology have to do to not get them to show up? Like, we want the grades out there because we assessed, and we want them in hack and TAC. But we don't want them to show up.
Home access center, teacher access center, yes.
But we don't want them to show up. So would the teachers have to go in and
I don't
do
know.
something?
Those are the details.
Right. There's Ray.
We'll ask Colleen.
I think what you're saying, though, hack and tack, but not the ESOL.
Correct. Because they're already in there, we've already put assessments, put scores in, it's calculating, but how do we get it to show up blank on the report?
Right, that's a thing, that's actually a Colleen thing, but I just want to make sure. You just don't want it to print on the ESOL, but you want to be able to, a parent to see it, parent portal, what they want.
Right.
Is this something you want to announce starting tonight with the parents?
I was thinking that, to get a parent. Yes. Well, I'll see two of them tonight. The two key, the principal of the year, I'm meeting with tonight, so I'm sure she speaks for the principals, right, Mr. Gearing?
She speaks for all of us, yes.
Mr. Gearing, what's your sense, putting you on the spot?
My sense is that you're right on track by asking Dina what she thinks.
Oh, I didn't see Mrs. Live. So Mrs. Live.
Well, and I will just say that when the principals met with Dr. McNeil to plan the Parent University sessions, I shared with her that I don't really believe there are parents out there who are against Singapore math or math in focus. I think people understand that this is a good change for our kids. But I shared that, in my opinion, the two issues that parents have, one is homework and one is grades. So to me, if we took away the grade piece, that would be an awesome thing.
Thank you, Mrs. Live.
Thank you, Mrs. Live.
See, she didn't need this, Dr. Work.
Hey, Dr. Wirt will agree with me.
Mrs. Cranny.
Just a few things, and kind of piggybacking on what Mrs. Lodge just said. I think at your parent universities, not so much concentrating on the why you're doing Singapore math, because the parents get that. You're going to have all the questions about the homework and the leveling and that. And also, it looks like, and assessments, you're starting to address those issues. The one concern still is the different levels and trying to address that. And I would like to know if there's any other fix we can do. And I'm thinking an extra aid. What can we do to help the classroom teachers with that? Maybe even just temporarily, maybe just this year, but to fill in these gaps.
Mrs. Cranny, I did have a meeting with the principals around that notion, and they were, of course, receptive to the idea of having aid support. And so I did work up some figures, and not wanting to be presumptuous, I did not bring that information to this meeting. But I think the principals know how I feel about aids. While I think it's important to have help, I am concerned about aids and what their role would be, because our teachers are the professionals, and I would want to be ensured that the teachers were teaching the program, and that what the aides would do, and would they need some training to even do something like a reinforcement or a practice activity. They might need some training. So I'd like to be able to go back to the principals and have a conversation about a realistic number of hours for these aides and what the aides would do, so their role in the classroom, and then what training, because all of the data, all of the research that the research does not support the use of aids as improving student achievement, and for the single reason that for the most part, they're never trained. There is no time to meet with the teacher to plan. There is no time to give them training in what they need to do. They're thrust into a situation. So we have to be careful that if we're doing this, that we're being strategic about it. So I'm going to ask the elementary principals, and we do have two others in the room who I guess we can ask to weigh in on the issue of grades as well as the aid issue. But that is my single concern with providing aid support. I did talk with Dr. Zur about having the special ed push-in look a little differently. So I think we all need to come together and have this conversation in a room and then decide what's the best option or options. Thank you. Dr. Lawless or Mrs. Welsh, I'm sorry, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on the grade situation at all. I wouldn't put you on the spot with AIDS, of course.
I'd actually rather speak to the aides, but only because Shawinigan Creek did not level in 3rd grade for the last several years as a pilot, and part of the success of that was having aides for an extra support, and I think that that could make a difference, particularly as we are looking at our upper grades, who the gaps are larger for. There are things that are presumed were taught at a much younger age, and they're not there. I'm not saying the aides take the place of the instructor, but having that extra pair of hands, being able to differentiate by pulling the group and working with them has made a difference.
So were your aides trained, Mrs. Welsh?
Our teachers provided all of the materials and what they needed to do. So they were trained by the teachers.
So they were trained by the teacher.
And that's an important component. It also happens to be that 99% of my aides are certified teachers. So I'm very blessed that way.
They still need training.
Right. I understand that. As for the grades, I'm kind of with Linda Lai. I think that the biggest concerns are how do we help our kids with homework, and why is my kid not getting the grades that they've always gotten in the past? How do we rectify that and still implement the program with fidelity?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Dr. Wallace?
I would just say that the focus on the grades and how we came about with some of the grades and the rubrics and having it kind of force fitted into a grade book has kind of taken the focus away from things that are more important. I know with some of the parent-teacher conferences, there was questions on how items were scored, when really that's probably not the most important conversation we should be having. So that would help refocus us, I think.
Yes. Thank you. Well, from 4 principals that are, well, 3 principals out of 4 that are here, I hear positive support of not issuing a grade this trimester for mathematics. Mrs. Hurd-Simmons.
Yes, I appreciate the time we took to discuss this because I know it's always been on the agenda and we're out of time and the whole bit. So I appreciate everyone's honesty about the issues. If the issue, I am all about the aides, training them and getting in more. So if it's a budget issue, because if the principals don't have the budget, then I would like, as a board, I would like a proposal to see what we need and what we need to change and adapt to the budget.
Excellent. And then I would include in that time to train the aides appropriately.
So the sooner the better.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes, Mrs. Brooke.
I just wanted to bring up, as we're all talking about the higher up in grade we go, the larger the content gaps. And I think we just need to be sensitive of how this impacted grade 6, 7, and 8. Unfortunately, we have already had our grades and already had our parent conferences. So, and I think what you're doing with the parent universities is fabulous. What's happening at the middle level?
So, Mrs. Brooke, Mrs. Simonelli asked me that as a little sidebar a few minutes ago.
I think you just threw us under the bus.
Well, you're just so middle school, you know, just kind of. We had a request from a home and school, I'm not sure which home and school president, and the request was for a meeting for which we had already scheduled a parent university, I believe it was next Tuesday. So we asked the home and school president for another date, and she said they weren't meeting until January, so she would give us another date. Now, in the interim, we are having a meeting with one of the middle schools.
Yeah, we did quite a bit of adjusting to the middle school, Karen, last week to get things much more in line with what elementary has done as well. Taking a look at tests, how do we deal with the tests? How do we make them shorter? How do we make sure we're all doing the retest the same way? So a lot of the stuff that we see, and Karen shaking her head yes, that we did at the elementary level, we did the parallel last week during the early dismissal to get things more in line. I worked with Karen, another teacher. We created a parent communication to explain something about the standards, to explain about the new textbook, to do all that, to get that word out there, and to load that on Moodle and everywhere else that we can load it. We're having our demo lessons tomorrow, which I'm very excited about, because actually one of the authors of the textbook is coming to do our demo lessons on Tuesday and Wednesday, and so I think that'll be very beneficial as well for the teachers to get that support.
So could I ask Karen, you and Kelly to give us an update for the middle level math in December? I think that would help Curriculum Council so that we know, and maybe we can, by then we'll have meetings in place, whatever that might look like at both of the middle schools for parents. So that we're hearing from parents that they're struggling as well. So December 3rd, if we could have that update. All right, thank you. I have one item that I must get in, and I'm going to ask you to be patient for one more minute. It's the Keystone schedule for the winter wave. Okay, so what you see in front of you no longer exists. There was a Keystone training on Friday, and the state informed us that we may not test the way we've been testing. We need to test one module per session, one module per morning, one module per afternoon. What we had been doing was a module of Algebra 1 followed by a module of English Lit, December 4. December 5, Algebra 1 followed by English Lit. December 6, 2 biology modules. We must do a module in the morning, a module in the afternoon. We may not do modules, even though they're different assessments, we may not do them in the same session. So the principals and I had a lengthy conversation this morning. To do anything other than what we've proposed would create an extreme loss of instructional time at the high school level. So what we are going to do is extend the testing. So we will be testing December 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. One module per morning. So 3 and 4, Algebra 1. 5 and 6, English Lit. 9 and 10, Biology. We did not want to test that way because that leaves us 3 days for makeups. But we couldn't think of any other way without just shutting down the high schools for 3 days. So it looks as though we'll need to follow that same schedule for the spring. It just involves more students, which is why, to my point with teachers of not scheduling field trips during that window, I have beseeched people, please do not schedule field trips during the spring testing window, because you just never know with the state what tomorrow's new information is going to be. And now we need 6 days of testing instead of 3. Will we need more in the spring? Well, that remains to be seen with the number of students if the principals can schedule it as simply as that. So I did want to make sure that you knew that before we left today. Well, I will. Not as soon as the meeting's over, but I will send them to you. We do not have dates at all. We just have the window, because as a middle school, high school group, we need to come together. Our charge is we must test the same test on the same days.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? get